So, this month, we are going to continue in our discussion as we've been looking for the last several months at how our mission is greater. This month, we're going to look at how a mission is greater mindset actually impacts your setup. How do you live in light of the fact that your mission is greater? This is where it really gets kind of hard because I think that for all of us, it is easy to intellectually understand that we are called to parent our children well. We're mom and dad, first of all. We are called to disciple them, to point them to Jesus, to give them a foundation for their faith. We are called to educate them in such a way that it's going to make it easy for them to walk through whatever doors God has for them in the days ahead. We don't want to do anything that's going to hold them back from following Him in any way. So that's easy to understand from an intellectual standpoint. Where it becomes difficult is where the rubber meets the road. It's how do I make this practical? What does this look like in day-to-day life? And so this month, I think it'll be a pretty short video, I want to give you some things to think about in moving from that intellectual head knowledge of what you're supposed to do to practically getting there. This is a big part actually of the heart schooling paradigm that I talk about all the time now. You've probably heard me refer to heart schooling. That is what we call biblical homeschooling, because heart schooling is actually that perfect intersection of biblical parenting and excellent home education. We've isolated 7 marks of a heart school family. The first mark is that you recognize your call. Again, I think that that's pretty easy. We talk about that all the time in here. The second mark, though, is where we're going to really focus this month because it involves realigning your thinking, actually starting to reposition your mark towards your calling instead of allowing all of the clutter in your day-to-day life, all of the competing priorities, all of the um, competing in agendas and so on to actually make it to where it feels utterly chaotic and out of control to probably you and your children, because it's utterly chaotic and out of control, but God doesn't want it to be that way, and I know that you don't either. So I want to give you some things to think about this week in this video, and then next week come for office hours. I just encourage you to make that part of your rotation every week. It gives us a chance to go deeper in what I'm talking about this week, but then also to make it really, really personal as you throw out situations and we discuss those. And it's not just me that's giving feedback, it's all of these other moms who have been there, done that. It is a great time for us to grow together. So join me next week for office hours, and let's really unpack this more. But this week, I'm going to give you some points to think about so that we can discuss it deeper next week. The first way to start realigning your thinking, to start actually setting up your family and your homeschool in a way that shows that you are living like your mission is greater. The first thing that you have to do is define the basics. So many people go all the way through without actually taking the time to quantify this. Here's why it's important. If you are, as I am right now, looking around a room that is messy, I have laundry all over the place and I'm trying to sort through stuff. I could show you, but I'm too vain for that. If you are surrounded by clutter, it's hard to work your way through. It's hard to figure out what is keepable, what is good. You're just shifting stuff around. It's just kind of chaotic and a mess, right? I don't function well in that scenario. So multiple times, often in a year, I will go through the act of decluttering. I will, have a pile that is definitely a keep pile, a pile that is nice to have, and a pile that just should go. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do with your homeschool and your family activities. What are those things that are mission central? No matter what comes your way, no matter what circumstances you encounter, these are the things that stay. This is mission central. It's important. Put those in a stack, on a list. Let yourself know these. What are the things that are nice to have? If we can fit them in, these are great. This is enriching. We love it. This is great. But it's not to this level of importance, but we like it. It's good to have around. And then what are the things that maybe you've outgrown, or it's just not good for the season, or maybe it was never good and it just kind of eased its way in and you don't know what to do with it now. Get rid of those, get them off the table, and take the time with your spouse, ideally. And it may be, just in all honesty, where you think through this and then have a conversation and bring your spouse in and get his feedback on it as well. Um, but separate out those things that just need to go. And then you're left with what is truly essential. And then you're going to start looking at how you shape your homeschool and the way the family functions, your rhythm around those essential items. Um, because it's easy, if you don't do this, to understand your mission, but then get lost in the weeds of all the stuff. And you find that you're just like shotgunning, um, just trying to get stuff out there all the time, and you're running ragged, but you're not getting anywhere. It's because you're not shooting for those essential things. So shoot for the essentials and then build them up with those second category, those nice to haves. I think that you'll find that that is a really, really great first step to realigning your thinking, realigning your practices with what your mission actually is. So that's point number one. Point number two, I want to encourage you to deschool for transformation. Here's what I mean about that. Deschooling is a concept that is thrown around a lot, but I don't think many people understand it. It is actually it's a time of allowing yourself to truly detox or walk away from all the ideas that you had of education before. We have been brought up, a lot of us were brought up in a brick and mortar school. All we see is pictures of brick and mortar schools. So we may not actually think of it as truly being where we're bringing this stuff home. But I think you'd be surprised at how many of these ideas of education have actually seeped into your homeschool that you were unaware of. So take the time to step back from all of that. Deschooling is actually a concept, and I find this fascinating. I wrote a little bit more about it in the book, but it was first posed as an idea in a book. It was written in the early 70s by a Russian guy named Ivan Illich. And he posited that brick and mortar, this traditional view of education, is not actually about education or learning at all. It's about a certain agenda. It's about getting people where they want to go. So there was a time when, like, corporate education started in the US, where they were trying to train people to be assembly line workers. They were going for efficiencies. They were going for all of these things. Now it seems like our schools are training people to be good citizens. They're like brainwashing them into that. But none of those things so it was set up, like the whole system was set up going in this agenda. Well, as homeschoolers, if we just kind of go with the same way they're doing things, it's not going to fit, because I guarantee you your agenda is not to train your children just to be factory workers or just to, be able to click boxes and do what they're told. You want to instill in your children a curiosity, a love of learning, the ability to find information for themselves. You want to take the time to give them a foundation for their faith and the tools to think biblically and critically. That doesn't fit in a traditional brick and mortar educational idea. So you need to wipe the slate clean of that. So actually taking the time to deschool is really important. And we talk about it as homeschoolers so often as that transition from when you start homeschool, or when you pull your kids out and you're starting homeschooling, and it fits great there. But it's also a good idea to check yourself every once in a while to see what's kind of crept in through the years, that kind of weaseled its way in, because we put so much pressure on ourselves. We think that we have to do things the way that it's done other places. We have to have stuff to show for it. And so it's very easy to allow some of these brick and mortar traditional education type concepts to slip in unawares. So it's good to take time to deschool, or to really step back and look at learning and the joy of learning in a separate way. What does education really mean to you and your family? What are you going for? How are you going to get there? I think you'll find that a lot of the things that you do during this season of deschooling you're going to really love, you're going to lean into, and they're going to become permanent. So, but allow yourself to actually wipe the slate clean of all of those things and periodically check to see what's crept back in. Even in our family, you get to high school and like all of this fear wells up. Am I going to be able to prepare them well for college? I'm going to do this, that, and the other. And it's very easy at that point to start outsourcing everything, to get them so involved in things that you hardly ever see them, you're just like program, because you're so convinced that you aren't enough to prepare them for the next step. And when you do that, you're walking away from your mission of spending the time with them and discipling and shepherding their hearts. You're walking away from having those conversations to allow them to take the information that they're reading and learn how to think biblically and critically about it. It's very, very easy, though, to allow that to happen. So the second step to actually aligning the way that you are homeschooling and the way that you're thinking with your call is to periodically do some deschooling, to actually evaluate your educational efforts and see how you have erred, or if you have erred, and how you need to line that back up again. The third step is to stack conditions for your success. So when you know what you're shooting for, you start putting stuff together to make that easier. We talk a lot in home education circles about combining, you know, classes together. We do history together. We do science together. It's the same basic concept. There, you're stacking conditions for your success. You're putting all the kids in one conversation, in one class, so to speak. And then you may give them different assignments, but they're all together. For us, stacking conditions for our success involved taking a time that I knew we would all be together, breakfast time, and using that time when I already knew we were already going to be sitting down together as a time to share what God had taught me in my devotions, as a time to get us all focused together on things of the Lord, as a time to start conversations for the day. We moved straight from that while we were still all together into what's called the fancy office in my house, just a living room that we don't use much. But we would go in there, we would crash on the couches, we'd read history, science, literature, we'd do these fun things together. We took our entire morning just to be together and to converse and to discuss what we were learning and go deeper on things and take the detours. I was stacking those conditions because my mission was to get to the heart of those kids. And I knew that the more that I learned with them, the more that we could talk about this stuff, the more successful that would be. So once I started not looking at these in silos, I need to do Bible time. I got to feed the kids. I need to do history. I need to do science. I've got to do literature. We've got all of these things, and it's like this big hot mess. How am I going to get it all in? Well, once I started stacking those conditions and just laying them on top of each other, it maximized our time together. It made everything very natural and very fluid so that it was comfortable. It was fun. It was some of the best moments of our homeschool, but it also was among the most missional. I guess they were among the most missional moments in our homeschool. So just really, really stacking those conditions is a big, big deal. The fourth thing is you've got to distinguish essentials from accessories. And this really echoes back to defining the basics. So you've already started looking at what's critical for your mission. So now you're going a little bit deeper and you're looking at what is essential and what is accessory. A lot of times the accessories are so shiny and so pretty, and we just love them so much that we hang on to them in a way or to the extent of really harming our relationships, harming our abilities to disciple our kids well, and to even sometimes to educate them well, because we cling so tightly to these accessories, these pretty little baubles that we just love so much. But when you start prioritizing the essentials, it helps you avoid a sense of overwhelm. It helps you see a much more clear path forward. It gives you an unbelievable bump in the amount of time that you have in your day. So I want you to take time this week and really start making two columns. What is essential? What is accessory? And then you need to see which of these accessories actually go in that recycle bin because they were great at one point, or maybe they'll be great at some point in the future. But for this season, these are accessories and they need to go. Um, that will set you free in ways that you can't even imagine. Then the fifth thing that I want to share with you is to celebrate progress over setbacks. We are our own worst critics, and we so focus on the things that we are lacking and the things that we don't feel like we do, that we miss so often the things that we are doing really, really well, or the growth that we are seeing in ourselves and especially in our kids, in our marriages, and so on. Um, and I want you to change your perspective on that. I want to encourage you to look at your days in a different way. In the book, I wrote a lot about new benchmarks, new ways to gauge our days. Again, when I mentioned deschooling a while ago, um, we tend to evaluate our days based on benchmarks or goals that were set by a traditional school system rather than benchmarks and goals that were set based on our mission. Our agenda, our mission is very different than the traditional schools is. So you need to really look at how you're evaluating your days through a very different lens. Um, Again, there are a lot of benchmarks that are listed in the Heart School book. So I'll link to it if you want to get a copy of it. It's available digitally. You can get a paperback. But I think it will be helpful as you just start thinking through these things a lot more deeply. And then the final thing, I want you to start with all of these things in mind. Start crafting purposeful days rather than setting up your days based on someone else's agenda, rather than allowing yourself to be controlled by the accessories or the non essentials. Start taking the basics, the mission central stuff, and the essentials, and allow those things to actually craft purposeful days for you where you can look in your rearview mirror and see, I know my children better than I did yesterday. That's a good day. I didn't get through everything on my planner, but I got through what was on my mission. That's a good day. Um, I was able to get to the root of a problem that has stumped me for a very long time with your child. That's a good day. That's a that's a day to be celebrated. That's when you are looking at your not your setbacks, you're celebrating the progress that you're making, and you're able then to allow all of those goals, all of those essentials, to craft purposeful days that will truly allow you to start aligning how you function day in and day out with that mission, that calling that you know that God has given you. Come back next week. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about your specific situations. Let's dive deeper into this. I just gave you the top of the iceberg, but I really want you to start thinking about these. I will list them out for you in the show notes. And then I encourage you to get the book as well, because a lot of this is in the book, although this definitely is not all in the book. So check that out. I look forward to seeing you next week at office hours, right? Right. And then I pray that I get to see you on site at Teach Them Diligently. We have a lot of great things planned for you. I just urge you to get your ticket now. Show up in either Pigeon Forge or Branson. On site, we're going to have special deals for the retreats that are coming up this year. So you can even save money on those if you're there. So make sure that you come and see us. We're going to have a great time, and I will see you next week. Have a great, great rest of your day, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.